Your tax dollars at work, this time with a more dangerous weaponry prepared by the Biden administration to be sent to the Ukrainians and Zelenskyy. This time around, it's a weapon that many countries have banned. And at the United Nations, you can be considered a war criminal. In fact, they tried to hold the U.S. as committing war crimes for using these weapons in Afghanistan and Iraq during those conflicts, the cluster bombs. Early in this conflict, there were reports that the Russians used cluster bombs. Hear what the Biden administration then said about what Russia may be guilty of.
There are reports of illegal cluster bombs and vacuum bombs being used by the Russians. If that's true, what is the next step of this administration, and is there a red line for how much violence will be tolerated against civilians in this manner that's illegal and potentially a war crime?
It would be. I don't have any confirmation of that. We have seen the reports. If that were true, it would potentially be a war crime.
There's been settlement discussions, negotiations going on offline between the Russians and the Ukrainians to try to get a resolution to this war. And it seems like every time they're getting close to at least discussions, that what happens is you have the Biden administration upping the ante by now saying to the Ukrainians, we're going to give you cluster bombs, which, as the previous administrations have said, was basically engaging in a war crime.
What I think people are so concerned about with this conflict is there is no end in sight. We keep escalating the weapons that are being used, and in this case, weaponry which will then greenlight the Russians to use more dangerous weapons in Ukraine. It's like we're egging them on.
This escalates the tension and escalates the conflict significantly. And again, there is no end in sight. So ask yourself, what is the real policy here that's being implemented?
I don't support having third parties or outside groups trying to do the work of the United States government. And yet, the State Department and the Biden administration should be pushing a peace plan. They shouldn't be running from any ideas. And yet they are. There is no State Department peace plan. There is just more talk of war and more money for war.
How do you end this conflict?
It certainly doesn't take a rocket scientist. It takes a diplomat to put people at a table and start talking about a peace plan. If you don't talk about a peace plan, you're going to continue seeing Russia escalate this conflict. They have nuclear weapons. I'm very concerned about the future.
The Biden administration doesn't have a steady hand on any of these issues.